I'm going to tell you a story of serendipity. It's a story of how the protocols of the American healthcare delivery system sucked me in, chewed me up, and spit me into the field of biomolecular psychology. This story illustrates the protocols of the American healthcare delivery system. Now, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of the healthcare systems of other countries, but I understand the subtleties of the American healthcare system rather well because this system has been intimately engaging me for more than 5 decades. When I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with a form of muscular dystrophy known as Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. Charcot-Marie-Tooth is a type of peripheral neuropathy that affects the transmission of information between the central nervous system and the rest of the body. Like other forms of muscular dystrophy, Charcot-Marie-Tooth is an extremely painful neuropathic condition. Typically, pain symptoms manifest between the ages of 5 and 25, and the condition is slowly progressive. Now, in my case, neuropathic pain began around the age of 18. Opiates have long been regarded as the most effective synthetic molecules for treating neuropathic pain, and following protocol, my doctors prescribed me codeine. My father was an anesthesiologist, so I was conditioned from early on to follow medical protocols, and and codeine worked great for about the first 2 years, and then I developed a tolerance. And at that point, following protocols, my doctors said, "Oh, well, that's okay. We've got plenty of opiates to choose from. What we'll do is we'll change the opiate and increase the dose." So throughout my entire adult life, following protocols, I developed a tolerance to every opiate basically invented. I went through them all, and my doctors kept changing the opiate, and increasing the dose, increasing the dose, increasing the dose. Finally, they increased the dose so high, and by high I mean 500 milligrams of morphine 3 times a day. That caused me to suffer a stroke. That's how I lost the use of my left arm. That's also the last day that I walked. Now, at that point, my doctors came to me and said, "Well, you at this point you've used up all the pill form opiates that we have. So what the protocol is now we put you into hospice because you've got less than 6 months left to live. Now we'll ensure you go out comfortably. We'll manage your pain and keep increasing the intravenous morphine over the course of those months, and eventually you'll stop breathing." And that's the protocol that we are bureaucratically mandated to follow by the hospital that we are affiliated with and by the insurance company that you're affiliated with. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I understand, but I'm done. I followed the pharmaceutical protocol for my entire adult life, and this is where it's gotten me. And so I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try the nutraceutical approach now, and I'm going to start with medicinal cannabis and see if that works. And of course, their response was, "Oh, no, 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 that's got no medical application whatsoever." I said, "Well, I understand your protocol. I understand the paradigm that you're operating under. Um, but realistically, what do I have to lose?" So basically, against my doctor's orders, um, I abandoned the American healthcare delivery system and started using nutraceutical medicine, started using medical cannabis. Interestingly enough, it worked. It treated the neuropathic pain from the muscular dystrophy, and interestingly, it also treated the 4 or 5 decade opiate addiction that had been inflicted on me by the American healthcare delivery system. So at that point, I'm like, okay, well, now I know that it works. Now I have to figure out why it works. I have a really strong background in molecular biology, and so by the time I started looking at this, um, it was already pretty well established, the mechanism how botanic cannabinoids treated neuropathic pain and treated inflammatory pain. But not really much was known about um, how it treats addiction disorders. And of course, it really worked effectively for the 4 decade, 5 decade opiate addiction that I had been inflicted on me. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I have to figure out why it works, how it works, and so basically, I I um, I began to look at addiction disorders. Now, the objective of this presentation is to provide you a conceptual framework that will aid in viewing addiction disorders from the perspective of biomolecular psychology. Uh, and we're particularly focusing on targeting the endocannabinoid system in the treatment of addiction disorders. Now, humanity has struggled to understand the nature of drug abuse and addiction for centuries. There have been many false starts and a few successes throughout the years. But despite the traditional resistance to to the medicinal use of botanic cannabinoids, their effectiveness in treating addiction outcomes is now beginning to be understood. The simplest way of conceptualizing biomolecular psychology is that it analyzes holistically from a biomolecular perspective. Albert Einstein is credited with the idea that if you can't explain your concept simply, you simply don't understand your concept. The objective of this presentation is to provide a simple explanation of how the principles of biomolecular psychology are applied to targeting the endocannabinoid system in the treatment of addiction disorders. Addiction disorders continue to take a toll on public health in most industrialized countries. More people die every year due to the ingestion of prescription medications and legal substances um, than by illegal ones. Millions of people die every year from addiction to pharmaceutical meds, tobacco, and alcohol, and currently accepted pharmaceutical treatments for addiction disorders have demonstrated limited efficacy and application. For these reasons, there is a need to better understand the brain's biomolecular mechanisms in developing new and better targeted interventions. Um, Now, the intricacies of a biomolecular response to a substance were only really understood once the instrumentation was invented to measure a biochemical reaction and integrate this data with an understanding of complex cellular biochemistry. This instrumentation would not be developed until the 1970s, so psychosocial and cultural explanations of addiction predominated in the science of medicine. A significant event occurred in biomolecular psychology in the 1970s when a biomolecular mechanism of addiction was identified. It was found that rats would repeatedly and willingly electrically self-stimulate areas of the brain which were subsequently demonstrated to comprise a set of dopamine neurons. This experiment was used to explain the findings of an earlier study which showed that stimulants enhanced this neurotransmitter's actions. A subsequent series of experiments demonstrated that blocking dopamine neurons with neuroleptic drugs impaired the reinforcing effects of addictive drugs in rats and primates. These studies placed dopamine as the central neurotransmitter in addiction and indicated that it played a critical role in reward, motivation, and incentive behaviors. This conceptual breakthrough coincided with the development of microdialysis sampling techniques pioneered by a group of researchers in Italy. Microdialysis sampling produced conclusive evidence that drugs of abuse release dopamine in the basal forebrain, which is a preoptic area of the hypothalamus known as the nucleus accumbens. This resulted in a general theory of addiction in which addictive drugs release dopamine, but non-addictive substances do not. From a biomolecular perspective, dopamine and serotonin are the only two things in life that we truly enjoy. Dopamine and serotonin are two neurotransmitters that the brain uses to communicate between one brain cell and another. Dopamine is the pleasure molecule. It's the molecule that tells the body, this feels good, I want more. That's how dopamine relates to addiction. Pleasure begets more pleasure. On the other hand, serotonin is the happiness molecule, the contentment molecule that says, this feels good, I don't want or need any more. Happiness and pleasure are two entirely different constructs. All addictive activities increase dopamine concentrations, and treating addiction disorders appears to be contingent on the distinction between pleasure and happiness. So what are the differences between pleasure and happiness? Well, neurologist Robert Lustig delineates 7. I've condensed the list to 5 because 5 is easier to conceptualize and 5 is easier to fit onto a PowerPoint slide. Pleasure is short-term, happiness is long-lived. Pleasure is visceral, happiness is ethereal or spiritual. Pleasure can be achieved through substances, happiness cannot be achieved through substances. The extremes of pleasure all lead to addiction, but there is no such thing as being addicted to too much happiness. And most importantly, biochemically, pleasure is dopamine. Biochemically, happiness is serotonin. The preceding discussion provided a necessary explanation of the dopamine theory of addiction. This theory views addiction as a disorder of the dopamine neurotransmitter system and is by definition a medical issue. As with the array of endocannabinoid deficiency disorders, neurotransmitter disorders are not yet recognized as diseases. While addictions come to be viewed as a disorder of the dopamine neurotransmitter system, targeting this neurotransmitter pharmaceutically has not led to new treatments. Although not officially a disease and therefore not technically a primary condition, neurotransmitter disorders can effectively be treated nutraceutically by manipulating the system that oversees the biomolecular mechanism responsible for the neurotransmitters production. Dopamine deficiency has been demonstrated to play a significant role in susceptibility to addiction, but these effects are mediated by the activation of serotonin neurotransmitters. So how does all this relate to the endocannabinoid system? Well, the easiest way of conceptualizing this is through an examination of two endocannabinoids that are critical to addiction, anandamide and 2-AG. Anandamide agonizes the CB1 receptors responsible for activating dopamine neurotransmitters, which result in the feeling of bliss or pleasure. Dopamine activation results in that sense of pleasure or bliss that is referred to as psychoactivity. This euphoria manifested by dopamine activation is considered the biomolecular mechanism that makes psychoactive drugs addictive. 2-AG is responsible for serotonin activation. That's the neurotransmitter that provides the sense of happiness, contentment, and well-being. 2-AG regulates stress-related behaviors and mood-elevating and euphoric or psychoactive effects, resulting in the intromission of dopamine-enhancing drugs. The endocannabinoid system has been called the single most important scientific medical discovery since the recognition of sterile surgical techniques. And as our understanding of its complexities expands, it becomes increasingly evident that the endocannabinoid system controls all physiological and psychological processes. As with many biomolecular psychology concepts, the simplest way of reaching the target is through modulation of the endocannabinoid system. The cannabinoid receptors and their endogenous agonists, antagonists, and inverse agonists are ubiquitously distributed throughout the central nervous system. They play a critical role in the regulation of neurotransmitter production and excitability. From a biomolecular perspective, addiction treatment is more likely to be effective by activating serotonin while repressing dopamine. Cannabidiol, or CBD, is the most useful botanic cannabinoid for accomplishing this. CBD inverse agonizes the CB1 receptor, blocking its axis, thereby mitigating the effects of addictive drugs. Simultaneously, it agonizes or activates the CB2 receptors, which activate the serotonin neurotransmitters. This biomolecular mechanism explains how CBD's intromission demonstrates efficacy in treating every substance abuse disorder we've ever studied. Evidence indicates biomolecular manipulation of the endocannabinoid system will complement the matrix model, an integrative therapeutic approach incorporating the most efficacious aspects of behaviorism, person-centered therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, the 12-step approach, and motivational interviewing. Given the extent of addiction to pharmaceutical and legal and non-legal substances throughout the industrialized world, it could reasonably be argued that an efficacious biomolecular treatment strategy of this nature could quite possibly benefit humanity. In the United States, politicians make medical decisions for the citizens they govern. In 1971, President Richard Nixon prohibited research on medicinal properties of any cannabinoid the cannabis plant produces. That half-century ban was recently rescinded by President Joe Biden, who has decreed that pursuing truth in this area is now permissible. This is the nature of science. Whether the opposition to attaining and disseminating scientific knowledge is politically or religiously motivated, humanity has the potential to ensure that this knowledge is eventually acquired. A new paradigm is emerging in which nutraceutical medicines such as botanic cannabinoids may be used either instead of or in concert with pharmaceutical medications. This allows some patient autonomy. I'll show you how this works. My name is David A. Dawson, and I'm the Chief Science Officer for a company called Aon Biohealth. And we provide, well, I can't explain in the time that we have everything that we do. If you want to look us up, you can go onto our website, aonbiohealth.com, and you can see what research we're doing, what medicines we provide, what technology we have to offer, which is like telemedicine and that sort of thing. We do so many different things. It's hard to explain, but our main delivery system is through the use of transdermal patches. And this delivery method is FDA approved because it uses the same technology as nicotine patches, except rather than providing an addictive drug, these patches deliver quantifiable doses of whatever medicine that we choose to put into that patch, and we can put virtually any medicine in, and it infuses into your bloodstream through your transdermally through your skin, and therefore bypassing the liver, which is, as you know, the organ that basically breaks things down, that degrades things. One of the things that humans are really, really good at doing is degrading things. Um, and um, and um, and so we like to bypass the liver and get the medication directly into the bloodstream so it doesn't get broken down. And that's why we use transdermal patches. So um, let me give you an idea as to how this kind of works from a standpoint of um, pharmaceutical and nutraceutical medicines. We have um, three pain um, three patches that treat inflammatory pain um, that are provided that we provide to patients depending on what they're looking for, and you can see them here now. You can see, like, the first one is a patch that provides strictly nutraceuticals, botanic cannabinoids and terpenes, and that's very effective for treating inflammatory, because these cannabinoids and terpenes, they all have anti-inflammatory properties. Um, and a lot of people don't like to use the pharmaceuticals. Personally, I haven't used a pharmaceutical medication since 2010. Um, so, and then the second patch that we're looking at here is um, is strictly our nutraceutical anti-inflammatory. This just I'm sorry, our pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory, and that's with MSM, and that is an FDA approved anti-inflammatory that has no side effects that they found. So that one is that one. A lot of people out there um, they want to everything has to be FDA approved, and this is an FDA um, approved synthetic, because the FDA can only approve synthetic medicines, patentable medicines. It's really all about where the money is, and right now the money is in patent medicine. So basically, that's our synthetic medicine patch, our pharmaceutical medicine patch. The first one is the nutraceutical medicine patch. Then the third one on here has the cannabinoids and terpenes plus the MSM. So it basically is both the nutraceutical and the pharmaceutical kind of working in concert. And the interesting thing is the CBG botanic cannabinoid synergizes the the MSM, it synergizes the synthetic anti-inflammatory, and that's really interesting. So this is a patch that works really, really effectively for people in some real major in inflammatory pain. Now, over the years, I've published a couple books. I want to give you an idea as to what those books are. First off, the first book I ever published was Medicinal Cannabis: The Definitive Guide. That's a textbook for the medical cannabis patient, and that is one that you can't imagine how many doctors have stolen that book from me. Um, and which is great. At least the information is getting out there. And I understand, doctors don't like to pay for things. They've got all these uh, student loans that they're having to deal with, and so they feel that they're entitled to walk off with a textbook, and it's interesting because these are doctors that are not allowed to learn this stuff. The hospitals that they're affiliated with cannot allow them to learn about the medicinal cannabis or the the biologic cannabinoids, the medicinal properties of the biologic cannabinoids, because it could affect the hospital's federal funding. So that's one book, and then I've also written a novel, which is kind of my story as a researcher of medicinal cannabis and what I've gone through. The basically my life story, I guess, and how how um, all the stigmatization that had been inflicted on me by my doctors, by basically everybody, because I opened up the I was the I opened up the first medical cannabis education company in the United States that had nothing to do um, with the um, production, the growing, or the distribution of of cannabis. And what I went through, and actually the court case at the end of this book is taken from actual court transcripts, and all the stories, all the chapters, those are actual true stories. And I've been told that the book is it's hysterical. It's also a tearjerker, apparently. I tried to make it as funny as possible, as entertaining as possible, but it also provides it basically it provides a lot of truthful information about how the botanic cannabinoids work to treat whatever autoimmune disorder that people happen to be inflicted by. So those are the two books, and I wanted to just kind of give you an idea as to what um, you can reach me through this email address, this dad8352 @gmail.com, and feel free to contact me. I want to say before I run out of time here, how honored I am to be a part of this distinguished group of clinicians and scientists that are at the cutting edge of producing, developing, and distributing uh, medicines for people that basically work. And like I say, I'm very very proud to be part of this group, and I honor you, and um, I don't know what more to say about that, but I'm really happy to be here and thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Please be content and help people. Thank you so much. Let's see, we've got a couple of reference slides.